Thank you for joining today's event, which is another Metapilot Academy Masterclass on building winning EU grant applications. My name is Diana Deca. I guess we can wait for a moment or two just to see if anyone else is joining. All right, looks good. Thank you for coming. So I was gonna start with share screen. I guess you guys can see it. So, as I mentioned, today's masterclass. So who am I and why you should listen to me? I know you're all very busy. And why is this worth watching? There's a plethora of random information on the internet. So here's why I think this is worth your time. So again, I'm Dr. Diana Deca. This is on behalf of Metapilot Academy and its business school, which has recently launched a program to help companies orient themselves around the EU research grant system. I myself am an expert evaluator for several EU Commission programs, Horizon Europe, the EIC Accelerator, which is one of the more advanced ones. So the EIC Accelerator from Horizon Europe offers startups between 2 million and 10 million euros per startup. I am the only decision maker for the ones that I evaluate. There are not multiple evaluators, and overall, this program has a 10 billion euro budget. Eureka as well, usually involving multiple countries. The Eurostars program starting now usually involves a consortium of at least two countries, usually 3 members. And then some previous experience apart from running the academy and Metapilot, working for a VC fund in Silicon Valley focused on biotech and neurotech. So yeah, we work with startups, research, and investors in between and help them figure out how to go about things. And I guess what you can get from me is a perspective on how evaluators think and ultimately what they would like to see before what investors would like to see after that. So imagine me as being on the other side when your proposal gets scored. And I also have a pretty good idea of what your Series A investors might ask. So why EU grants matter? When you are in tech, and I'm just gonna call it serious tech, and you'll see why. It's more of a way of thinking rather than anything else. So the EU runs one of the largest public research funding systems in the world. The framework programs, FP7, Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, now it's close to 100 billion euros. These programs exist to keep Europe scientifically excellent and technologically sovereign, especially in deep tech, so what we call science spin-offs and strategic sectors. For founders and researchers across the EU, these grants are a vehicle to de-risk frontier technology, to build teams that are able to execute on that technology and powerful consortiums, and bring investors with much stronger leverage. So one thing that I think is worth being proud of in Europe is the fact that these grants are designed to be given before investment. There is an investment component to some of them, but if you have a great technology that you think Europe shouldn't miss out on, that is truly scalable, and that is backed by serious science, then this is where you go. And it is, believe me, a lot easier to do this with grants in the beginning when you have such a technology than to go directly to investors, because this is much more patient capital. It will not require a return on investment in the next few years. So, next steps. And by the way, if any of you have questions, you are more than welcome to ask. I think we might have some kind of issue. So, a bit of history of EU funding. Right, so I hope you guys can still hear me. Right, history of EU funding. And this is an interesting thing to think about because it puts things in perspective. So it all started in the 1950s through the 70s, where European communities already had some kind of research provisions. The coal and the steel research, Euratom for nuclear research, mainly to rebuild and modernize the industry after the war. So you see what ultimately drove Europe to put funding together to keep this technological sovereignty is a war. But it spun into something much more important. In the 1980s, the first formal framework program appeared, these FP programs at around 4 billion. This was 84 to 87. And then some other industrial tech programs like Esprit, Race, Euram, a lot of industry focus to help Europe compete with the US and Japan. And then in 1986, the Single European Act added a specific research chapter to the EU treaties, making research and technological development an official community competence. So that's when these multi-annual frameworks appeared as an instrument. So this is all very recent. So then in the 90s, these FP packages that were multi-year expanded, and now we see 13 billion, 15 billion euros going. The idea is to go from pure science into a structured industry academia collaboration across Europe. And this is also very important, for our community in Barcelona, but it's important everywhere in Europe because there's this ongoing discussion of how we bridge academia and technology still. And then from 2007 to today, we have these, we had Horizon 2020, the FP programs, and now Horizon Europe, which will run for another 2 programs. And then more programs will appear. And it's exciting to think what those will look like. We have the ERC and the EIC. So ERC is mostly for the research side, and EIC is for the research being turned into technology, which is more interesting for the people with SMEs in the crowd. So we have a European research area, and that's where most European researchers apply for grants. And then there's the European technological community, which has this cross-border collaboration aspect to it. So from the FP7 to Horizon Europe, I'm gonna really shorten the history because you saw the whole timeline just now. So introducing the ERC grants, then maybe those of you who are in science, for sure you know ERC grants. And then the Horizon 2020, which lasted until 2020, as the name suggests. And the purpose of this was to unite research and innovation. And in the US, we have seen similar calls. DARPA was a great example of bringing research into technology, mostly on the defense side. And then Horizon Europe keeps the pillars. So the pillars in Horizon Europe remain excellent science, global challenges, and industrial competitiveness. And that's where EIC sits. These developing technology. So what this session is about and what it is not about. And we're going to discuss some things that are how you go about things. Sorry, I cannot see you guys. So I'm just checking in from time to time that you're still there. Yeah, it seems the camera was disconnected. Let's try again. There we go. We are back. Exciting times. So what this session is about, as I was saying, we're going to cover the basics of these Horizon Europe EIC Eureka grants, the structures, the eligibility, country rules, the logic of a consortium, which, by the way, it's important. TRL, because some people asked how high the technological readiness needs to be in your business traction. And the focus will be on deep tech, so software plus hardware, AI, all of these things, rather than grand bureaucracy, and on the technology. But we can discuss. You'll see the bureaucracy is kind of built into that. Um, so what this is not something to copy paste into ChatGPT and think that this will work. What I can say very bluntly, and I think it's true of any evaluator, which usually from what I've seen, evaluators have like a strong technical background, usually PhD level technology background, and they have some kind of industry traction that they demonstrated, whether that's being backed by investors for the product they're building for the technology product, or corporate investors or things like that. So these two elements in both worlds to be able to assess these grants. So when you have a person like that looking at your grant, they will be looking at some main things. One is, what is your technology? And rather than discussing, the possibility of you building the technology like AI, obviously this will not fly. So it has to be a real technology that is very clear, and it is very differentiated from any other technology. And then the science behind it needs to be backed with scientific publications that we do verify. Um, and then obviously the quality of the publications, the technology, but most importantly, has to answer a real question in industry. And the perspective is this something that Europe cannot miss out on, right? Because the success rate of these EIC grants is 5%. So any application that is copy pasted into ChatGPT without a real consortium, without real science, without real technology, and without deep work behind it, months and months and months of deep work before even writing the grant, will probably be removed from the beginning. I cannot speak for how that part of the process is done before it reaches evaluators, but I imagine they will not even reach human evaluators. So yeah, if you have a great consortium and a great list of publications, and it connects to the technology, and the technology is into high enough TRL, and it has sufficient traction, ideally paid pilots and patents, then this is worth looking at. And you can use, if you like, some form of ChatGPT, because we will be able to verify the important parts. No, the pillars. So I mentioned these pillars, and people might be wondering why I keep saying pillars. So the first one, the excellent science one, is the ERC grants, the Maria Sklodowska Curie ones that are usually for PhDs and postdocs, and then the research infrastructures. So this is the scientific academic part. And it's very researcher driven. So these would be the kind of grants. If they go into EIC, where I'm at, then this would be kind of a spin-off of the university. Let's say some postdoc comes up with some patents based on excellent research publications, and these patents are put into a company that has excellent traction. Then we can start looking at EIC. Pillar two is global challenges and industrial competitiveness. So health, climate, digital industry, space. What I can say is for EIC this year, there's a lot of climate work, and there is more and more investment in climate technology. So can be an interesting avenue for some of you. And then pillar three, innovation. So EIC, and I'll get into that in a second. There's the accelerator, transition, and pathfinder, and they have different TRLs and different ways they work. There's the EITKICs and the European Innovation Ecosystem, so the home of deep tech startups and scale-ups. So excellent science, the ERC funds, usually principal investigators, so that's usually what you become if you do a postdoc. The scientists know, and their teams to do high risk, high gain frontier research in any field, right? And with these, you can have the starting, consolidator, advanced synergy. For the starting one, you have a limit from when you defended your PhD thesis to when you can get this. It's usually a few years, and you can already have more than a decade passing, because then it's not starting. And then usually people apply for consolidator, advanced, etc. as they progress. So they get the starting one, they go for consolidator, then advanced, and so on. It's very bottom up, meaning that you start from the purest science, and what matters is the maximum scientific ambition and all of it. And then this will function based on academic rules, quality of publications, impact factors, quality of consortiums, the research itself, where you're seen in the scientific community, all these things. This is important for you if you're not a scientist, because obviously the labs that get this kind of funding, they generate amazing science, some of them towards cutting edge IPs and patents and talent that can then become spin-offs that might be relevant for you. And for you, if you want to apply for an EIC or an Eureka grant with your company, I highly recommend, when building your consortium, to look specifically for the people that have obtained grants like this for obvious reasons. When an evaluator sees that there has been multiple proof points that there's excellent science, there's excellent transition to technology and all of that, then of course that improves your chances. That said, just like I said, do not just put some ideas into ChatGPT and submit the application. Also, do not spam ERC labs with ideas, especially if it's about AI. These AI labs work on very specific things, and it's a very good idea to approach them with something very clear and a very clear value proposition. Nothing general, nothing generic, nor template like emails, also because you have only one chance to have a good first impression. If you yourself have a PhD or a postdoc, it will help your situation a lot because you gain some credibility. However, it does not mean that you're going to get through or that they will take you seriously. So really consider, when you're trying to build a company, what is it really? If it's a chatbot or a ChatGPT wrapper, I highly advise don't contact scientists with this. They will not be happy. But if you do have ideas that you've put some real thought into, then you can start contacting people. And consider, if you are the business person in the team, consider having a technical person that does have that knowledge, and maybe even speak to a technical person if you're more business oriented. Speak to technical people, and I mean PhD and up, and see what they have to say, what they think should be built, and then try to have that back and forth thinking, rather than saying, oh, I want to build an AI, let's find AI researchers. The latter, what I just described, is more likely to work, the bottom up approach. So I mentioned this you already know, with doctoral networks, postdoc fellowships. So for you to know if you have a startup, the researchers obviously know what this is. These are very, very competitive grants, all of them at the European level. So when you speak to someone that obtained this grant, it's quite likely that they are quite serious about their research. And they also facilitate mobility. So this is definitely something you can work with. You can look at the research infrastructures like funding for shared European facilities, lab, data infrastructure, instrumentation. These are basically free resources that when you put those into a European grant, they help if they make sense. Again, why they matter for startups, because you can tap into these networks. You can leverage infrastructures for validation, testing, and credibility. Again, do not randomly add these to the application. So just saying, hey, I have access to a Barcelona supercomputer will not do. You have to explain very clearly why that is. Ideally, if the scientists themselves can explain, what experiments they did with those instruments in the past and why this is actually important. Pillar 2 calls. So the Pillar 2 ones are kind of a transitional thing, and they fund multi-partner, multi-country research innovation projects. Why are these grants designed for multiple partners across multiple countries? Because it de-risks things. Let's say you're looking at quantum computing research project. If these projects run in multiple countries and they're all funded by ERC, and then they use similar instrumentation, and then multiple people found that this would be the application and they found traction together, then this starts to make a lot more sense than like one group or one SME finding this. So you see why I was discussing strong consortiums. So 3+ countries, mix of universities, research centers, SMEs, large companies, sometimes even governments or public authorities. The more the merrier, but again, everything has to make logical sense. And they will make logical sense to you before you ever add them in a search bar or with GPT. I would highly advise that the thinking process begins separate from any search engine. Yeah, so this is kind of a way to co-design the test beds. So the instruments. Now we're going into EIC. So I'm up here. I usually deal with EIC Accelerator, and please, by all means, remove me from your evaluator list if you know me. But they start with Pathfinder. So some people said, oh, but these European grants require super high TRL. No. That's why they transition all the way from the research grants from ERC, which are completely crazy blue sky scientific ideas, all the way into TRL 9. At Pathfinder level, you're pretty much looking at things that are just being taken outside the lab. It might be the first patent that you're applying for. So this is to prove feasibility. It's still very basic research going into technology. And this is a 3 to 4 million euro grant, 100% funding rate, so no co-funding from you requested at this point. And it requires minimum 3 legal entities, all from different member states of the EU. So FYI, basic eligibility, you need to be an EU citizen. Do not apply to this if you're not a EU citizen. This is for only those. And the companies need to be incorporated in an EU or third country, so associated EU country. EIC transition. So this is slightly higher TRL when you demonstrate a technology. Maybe you have a POC with a company and they looked at your prototype. And now you can be from one applicant to maximum 5 legal entities. Again, this is really about the core, like you yourself should be excited about how logical and clear your proposal is. It's not about, like I said, starting with the highest number of entities. If you look at the scoring list and if you try to work backwards from there, people will know. The idea is you want the evaluator to really get excited about what you're doing there and really see that this required a lot of hard work. And then the last one, which I said I deal with, so this is TRL 528, and there's an equity component now. So that's when the investment comes in. It is a single applicant at this point, because by the time you apply to EIC, there should have been a lot of the other work, the transition to Pathfinder, and a lot of labs involved. So at this point, I would recommend that you have a very strong research consortium behind you. And so you see it starts with this grant, but there's up to 15 million euro more in equity investment. And this is very patient capital as well. Yeah, and you're now a single applicant. So this is to launch, to develop operations for subsystem development. Let's say you had a well-paid POC with a corporation and they require some more things to be built, something along those lines. So we've been talking about EIC. I think EIC is really important. And it's a wonderful instrument if you think about it. I mean, imagine not having these and having to look for investment for that at this level of deep tech, right? Imagine you have some kind of climate or biotech solution and then trying to fundraise for that. So where Eureka and Eurostars fit next to this Horizon Europe grants, the EIC grants, um, Eureka Eurostars is a separate but complementary network, so it's international, it's market oriented, and this is where the funding flows via national agencies. And Eurostars focuses on R&D performing SMEs and consortia of at least two countries. And with Eurostars, the main thing is you're going to have to check with your local country which one it is, because sometimes some countries do not contribute, and then you just have to wait for your national point of contact to get in touch. But just go to Eureka, go to Eurostars, figure it out. So YU grants are a great option for your startup if they are used correctly. They can be non-dilutive or less dilutive. The grant covers the R&D. It has strategic alignment. It has the quality stamp, which is the success within the ERC research network, which is extremely important. And of course, EIC grants, once you get those, they are such a strong signal for investors and partners, right? Because then VCs and investors don't really need to do that much diligence on you. They know exactly where you are. They see your traction. They see the research. So you see why this is all very logical, and it makes sense. So done well, EU funding is important. It's not noise. It's a credential that de-risks you in the eyes of investors. And frankly, it puts you in a position where you have a lot more leverage. When you speak to investors and you have an EIC grant behind you and the investment component, you say, okay, you know what? We already raised 50 million euro. We have this very strong team. We know exactly how we're growing, and you can be in or not in. But you'll never be in a position where you have to ask an investor whether your company should exist. And in general, as a startup founder, this is a much better position for you. So these are the founder pathways, the RCMSCA, the Horizon Europe ones, the IC Accelerator, what I just explained, which is the industry-oriented or startup-friendly route. And there's the mixed route, where you look at spin-offs and you work with them, which I kind of recommend for people that aren't technical founders, because this, when it's a spin-off, you can really see that this has been, there has been some process, some thought process behind what's happening there. So who's eligible where? Horizon Europe, ERCMSCA, EIC Accelerator, Eureka, Eurostars. You're going to have to look this up. It's not too difficult, but by all means, do not apply for things that exclude your country of citizenship or that exclude where your company is not incorporated there. It just adds noise. And honestly, when you attach your name to something that you put online, it kind of adds up. So when you apply for the things that you're qualified for and you show that repeatedly you're reading the description, this works in your favor. Let's put it this way. So for the research stuff, obviously we lead with scientific question. This is for the scientists in the group. For innovation stuff, try to lead with problem solution thinking. So tech differentiation, use cases, things like that. And then, YU grants versus private money. This is for you to think about. If you have an angel that believes in you no matter what, fantastic. But I really recommend that you do this. You mix it up. EU grants, bring it to TRL 6 to 8 to de-risk, then raise equity at TRL level 9, and then only get into discussions with investors. If you're in Europe and if you're a national, then this really benefits you. And don't forget the national grants. So there are grants in Spain, there are grants in Catalonia. And then I highly recommend, if you're a European citizen, try to look at the grants that your country is offering, because it really helps you, especially if you connect with that. Your, let's say, rights are important in your country of citizenship. So pros and cons. Obviously, big tickets, a lot of pros, cons, insane competition, and it really needs to be deep tech, and it really needs to be well thought through. There may be other grants or applications where you have a half an hour discussion with a business angel, and you don't have to put in all the work. So if you want to build a really big project that is really deep tech, this is going to require a lot of thinking, and I'm saying 6 months thinking. What not to do, like I said, don't spam labs. Don't assume that a new grant is quick cash. It is the opposite of quick cash. It should be deeply embedded in your strategy of building a company. um, and yeah, so ending with this, there's this incubator that we just launched. We are now taking applications. Obviously, there are more people on the team that are both evaluators, but also have experience winning these grants. And then we have our huge network of research labs, of companies, etc. So yeah, it will start with the discussion. We do take a percentage of successful grants, and there's a fee model there. So have a look if you're interested. I will add here the QR code for those of you that want to apply to the MetaPilot EU Funds Incubator. This is a very new thing. And then you can also just go to metapilotacademy.com, that incubator. I've seen some really strong applications so far, so I'm excited about this. And for those of you that are in Barcelona, I'll also be presenting this tomorrow. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you soon.